podcasts in 3.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ludic Society. This is a very exciting day, one of our big interview days, as it turns out. I am here,
and usually I
think you'll be able to hear everybody just now. Hello.
Hello.
I am here with a lot of people who will be introduced very shortly. But before we get started, we want to remind you that the Ludic Society is brought to you by the Center for 21st Century Studies, as is all of Serious Play. Right now they are, what is C21 doing this week? I mean, I don't know. They do different things all the time, but David, are you aware?
They're investigating the most pertinent and important questions about living in the 21st century. What that means in actuality, I don't know.
Fair enough. Maybe that is the lowest praise we've given them on one of our streams, but they are wonderful and they do cool work.
No, they're great. They're great.
Also, it's important to remember, of course, that the Ludic Society is brought to you in partnership with Vehemence. If you need a safe and inclusive place to play ARGs, please don't be afraid to hop through that QR code and pop over to the ship of the Vehemence. Anyway, so welcome. David is I am very happy with this. The new overlay is here. Welcome to the Ben Drown dubbed interview, the day where we get to ask some amazing questions to some amazing creators who are right above us right now. They're all up top. Hello. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves and what it is that you did on the dub project?
Sure. Hello. Hi. I am Circle Hunter. I directed the dub. I guess you can call it that. I more or less just begged a bunch of people, hey, you want to do this thing with me, please? And they did it. Losers. Really, really conned them into it.
the dub con, as it turns out.
Oh, fair for it. All right. I'm Rodent. I'm an aspiring artist, and I did some work on Ben Drown Dubbed, and I'm happy to be here. I hope we all have a good time.
Hi, my name is Edric X. I stream games. I voiced Judicible's roommate, if I remember correctly, in the dub, and I also loosely voice directed it, I suppose. I'm very happy to be here.
I didn't realize you voice directed it. That's rad.
Again, loosely.
Loosely. Rosie says Circle lured us all into the dub Ponzi scheme.
She's not wrong.
So,
is there, as long as there's not crypto involved, everything's fine, right?
All my apes gone.
There's no crypto within
All
1,000
their apes
feet of
gone.
Ben Drown.
I stole all the apes.
Oh no.
That was you?
It was me. I stole the apes.
Is that how you paid for the dub?
You think I'd pay anyone? Jeez. That's awful of me. I'm sorry.
So I will ask my co-host to introduce ourselves again. As you know, I'm Ren. I'm a master's student at UWM, and I'm joined by 3 other lovely people.
I am Morgan. I am a master's student as well at UWM. I'm currently in Michigan, so I'm a remote person. But yeah.
I'm David Kutchik. I am slowly adjusting my camera to see if people can see me. I'm a PhD student at UW Milwaukee.
And I'm Diego. I am an undergraduate student here at UW Milwaukee in the Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering Department.
Wonderful.
Diego's weird.
Diego
Yeah, I'm the weird one.
Diego's the STEM major. How dare you know how things actually can build? That's my. You can tell I'm an English major. I called it build. So here's how this is going to work. We have a list of 10 questions that are on paper that we're going to ask these fine fellows above us. And we also have questions from you, the audience, things that people from Vehement sent us beforehand, as well as we're happy to take any questions you have live and give them to the people, again, above our heads. We really, my view anyway is that whatever questions the community has are the ones we want to kind of put first. And then after that come our questions. And I don't expect we'll get through all 10 guys, but because we're going to want to go off on tangents and, explore ideas. But yeah, so before we get any further, I always am super heavy on the front loading crap, but I swear this is really important. If you have not already, go watch the complete story dub. I just put the link to it in chat. Obviously not right now, but after the stream, it'd be a really good idea to do it.
Do it right now.
Don't watch.
Time.
Don't watch our faces. We have ugly faces.
Within each side of the headset.
But do go check the dub out. It is genuinely an amazing project. I think it's the definitive way to experience the Haunted Cartridge Arc, and we just spent 3 weeks making another way to experience the Haunted Cartridge Arc. So I think that maybe says something. And maybe that's a good place to kind of start. I do want to get immediately to our audience question, but first, how many times have people told you guys that this is the definitive way to experience the Haunted Cartridge Arc at this point?
Those comments on the video itself there were a good 4 or 5 people in there that said something along those lines, and man, it was just it was a good feeling.
It's very heartwarming to be a part of that, to be honest.
It is very good.
feels,
Yeah.
it feels incredible.
You've done some amazing work. I mean, it really like adds. I mean, I've heard people go so far as to, and not just the people in this room, but go so far as to say it really adds something to the original text post. And I think that's really hard to accomplish since the Ben Drowned text post has been done so many times, you know? So it's remarkable work, really. So to get to the first questions from both fans and us. This question comes from Vehement's moderator and fan. I don't know if I can say fan. I don't know if that's right. A person who often watches us, Mediocre. She asks, what was the driving force to make the story dub? Was it a lack of easy content or like a lack of an easy way for beginners to get onboarded into the content? Was it for like history making, posterity, or did you just do it for fun?
Well, if you don't mind me going a bit far back, do any of you know about what birthday.wmv was by any chance? Oh, so basically in August 2020 for Judiciable's birthday, we decided to dub over the current Awakening videos, some of them, and put that out for like on his birthday and show him it to like celebrate the work that he's done so far in the year. And then I suppose it's always been in our minds that we would eventually do all of it all together from the start, and then eventually Circle wrangled us up and finally got us into doing it. So the reason why we did it, the driving force, I'd say, is because for people to experience it in a method, or I guess Circle, you could explain this better than I can at this part. I just wanted to give a bit of history behind it.
Yeah, that was definitely probably the biggest part of it in current times, really. There were plans several years back to do something like this, but it just never happened. No one really committed to it. And then once Awakening happened, we saw that the birthday project actually took off, and that gave me really the motivation to actually make something like this happen. And by that time, people had already done something similar, so it was just a matter of doing the rest of it.
Yeah, I think Michael Anderson had said like, well, hey, if you guys get the Ben Drowned dub people on, you should get Nexpo to come on too if you can. I should maybe punching above our pay grade. But I mean, it's the other project that comes to mind as far as like trying to, although that's live action, bit of a different shtick. Yeah, I didn't know about birthday.wmv. That's fascinating. I know Morgan had something to say, and I cut Morgan off.
Oh no, I was just doing my standard yes. Good. Sorry.
Teachers love me.
Hearing the baby.
Oh, sorry. I can mute if that becomes an issue.
So Awakening.
But yeah, as far as the other things that you were saying, like lack of easy content for beginners, and just for history's sake, yeah, those are also a big part of it. Essentially, my thought process for this project is that I just want it to be both a collaborative thing that people can be a part of and sort of a video version of the wiki.
So that is your ethos coming to it, is the video version of the wiki.
It has to be as accurate as possible, or I'm going to just lose it.
I know the Haunted Cartridge arc is relatively linear compared to most ARG because it is like essentially mostly known to be just the creepypasta, but it definitely helps in the later arcs that if we work on them by any chance, it'll help make them more linear as well. Because obviously, in the nature of an ARG, bits and pieces are scattered everywhere, so it helps to essentially create a straight timeline for viewers. Because a good thing about Awakening when it came out was Circle's wiki. It helped me, God, because I was like 12 when the Haunted Cartridge started, so it helped me catch up very easily.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed when I was watching the video, you put the tags to be visible, and YouTube doesn't allow the tags to be really visible anymore. So that's kind of a part that usable references like, hey, I changed the tag so you guys could see when this is happening or not. And so like having that visible is really helpful because it's not available on YouTube anymore.
That's something that nobody ever mentions when they cover the story. And it's important because that's something he explicitly mentions. So if there's not a way to fit something into the script, it's going to be on screen.
Yeah, this was something
Yeah.
actually that I realized I had fucked up on when I started trying to cover Moon Children. Because for the last couple weeks, for those of you in the audience or anybody who doesn't know, I've been doing the research to bring the next stage of the coverage from us out. And he mentions the tags in the Haunted cartridge, but you could get away with not mentioning them. As you said, Circle, a lot of people do. We did. But you can't get away with that in Moon Children. They become like exceptionally important because all of a sudden they're changing. And I actually, that's a question that can be tossed up is this Haunted cartridge is relatively stable, and eventually, I know you guys have signaled that Moon Children is eventually going to come out. I mean, what do you do when you're dealing with trying to make a linear video with things that are changing on that level?
The only way that I feel comfortable progressing is linear in a sense that it's the order that we experience the things. If something occurred and we didn't see it happen, then that event goes when we experienced it rather than when it actually happened. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So it's not so much chronologically within the narrative of the story, but chronologically with when people can encounter it.
Which is its own chronology.
Yeah, I feel like that creates the most authentic experience of reliving the experience that the players had. If you do it in that manner, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to step on Rin's toes too much, but this kind of leads into a question, down
Don't
the
step
line.
on my toes. Jump around.
About
Do
like
it.
so like when you're trying to make this player experience or kind of make it into a video, because originally this was just on 4chan, like a forum post, and then there were some videos on YouTube. How did you kind of merge the two and make it into a video format as compared to like the original experiencing of it, like adding art and stuff? How did you kind of approach that?
So, with the later parts of the story, the visuals are a large component of it. There's a lot to see and read at around the same time. In the first arc, it's just text posts and videos without dialogue over them. So the issue was, what do we put on the screen while someone's reading? So that's where the art idea came from. We just want to visually have some sort of thing going on. So that was the biggest part of it. Most people, they just read it. One person the whole time reads the whole story, and it's just one static image on the screen, or just like a series of vaguely related images. And that's what I wanted to try to avoid.
It also helped us to show off like the talents of artists that we wanted to put on the screen, because the artwork that was made was incredible, and it helped to showcase these people, which was a very big part of it, in my opinion.
That's the biggest part of it, honestly.
It's the most important part of it.
This would be nothing without all of the artists who did their parts.
100%.
Yeah, I'm glad that, speaking of artists who are here.
Yeah, I would say that Arc 1 is definitely the best one to convey in a visual aspect, especially in like drawings or on any media, just because in how the story is made. It feels so real that to the point that you can always imagine it in your head and you can always convey it. That's why I think the art aspect in this specific short is great. I really like working on it and seeing other artists come up with their ideas as they worked and stuff.
Yeah, I think the art, because I was a little bit absent for part of the arc of coverage because I was moving. So the art, I think, really captured more of the desperation of like what was happening to this guy. I felt like it was like, hey, these things are happening, but it's also messing with him really mentally. And I think the art really kind of captured that a text post wouldn't necessarily convey.
Yeah, there's some parts like, especially I think I could be wrong, the dream sequence Rosie drew. I Sergio can correct me, I'm not sure. Uh, it's great. I love that drawing. The drawing she made for that specific, the dream of the mole children. It's great.
Yeah. So go ahead, Circle. Sorry.
Oh, I'm just agreeing with Roded. You know what Rosie actually did with her art compared to everyone else's. Like I say it wasn't me. There were multiple people with input on this, but we had strict color palettes set for certain things. And what we told Rosie was, "You're the only one who doesn't get this color palette. Go crazy."
Great.
Because dream sequences, it's different. And what she did, it turned out to be some of my favorite art in the entire video.
Well, it works pretty well. How shattering it is. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean this was like one of I mean, you guys know, you saw the questions ahead of time, but this is one of my things. Is I was like, well, you know, Majora's Mask is a really vibrant game. You know, like especially even within the group of Legend of Zelda games, it does not hold back. It's all purples and oranges and greens all over the place all the time. It's very ostentatious. And it manages to do that while remaining somehow subdued. I think mainly in terms of how they've leveraged the lighting. But for you guys, I mean, you went the opposite direction. You go right to grayscale, and then you have a dream sequence which breaks that kind of gray purple motif. And like, you know, I'm aware enough of Circle's preferences. I know where the purple probably came from, but I'm joking. But I did want to ask, like, how did you settle on that subdued color palette? And then, you know, obviously, I guess Rosie just went off and did some amazing work outside of that.
So the color palette actually came from someone else who didn't do art on the project. So I will not credit them by name by their own request. That was their own personal choice in this matter. We credited them in the video as band user under special thanks. So that was their chosen name to be credited with. But they didn't actually do any of the art in the video, but they did help us hammer out that palette and give us those ideas.
So this is the point in time where I'll tell my co-hosts, if you want to jump to any of your questions, go ahead and do it. You do not have to wait for me to call out any of the questions, of course. Follow up on whatever you want to follow up on. Part of this I'm telling for Diego, because I know Diego's thinking things. I can see it in his face.
I am thinking things, not like my original questions, but as I'm thinking through some of the material that we're covering in one of my classes, we talked about the museum and as an institution, and I'm just, was preservation of this, like, how does preservation of this story kind of play into how you're writing it, directing it, kind of how do you, because we know from some of the past streams that there was some kind of language that was used that isn't really appropriate anymore, that we wouldn't use. And so how do you stay historically accurate? How do you preserve authenticity, but then kind of try to keep with the times?
It is a hard line to really navigate on that front. I don't like censorship. I don't like pretending things didn't happen. So the policy that I'm trying to follow here is lay it out as it happened, but just be, I don't know, sensitive about it. We can't just pretend these things didn't happen. That's sort of where it boils down to me. Because preservation, that's my whole thing. I'm the archive guy. So really, to censor it, to pretend certain things weren't said, that certain things didn't happen, doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, because I was just curious about that, just because it's in my brain, fresh from some stuff I've been thinking about.
Keeping
Yeah.
it true to the original, as authentic as possible, is like one of the main primary focuses for sure. And it's like, I I know it's hard to explain really. You, it's it's kind of got to keep in mind, like, it is acting. Like, we're not enforcing that certain things should be said or used, but it is with the nature of an ARG that things go missing, like parts of Ben Drowned are missing that we're still looking for. It really wanted to be as authentic as possible so that nothing could ever be missed, no matter what it was. And I know it's a big question of, well, should it be kept? But in my opinion, the answer is kind of yes, because I want it to be the true experience for sure.
Yeah, and I kind of it's always the question of, well, the way that you produce it, do you say, hey, this was back in, 2011? I don't know when it was made, but back my brain was just like, no,
2010.
Like
2010 is your
2010.
answer. Yeah.
Okay, so it's 2010.
I got your back.
Yeah, so it's like hey, this was made in 2010, so it's different. Or do you kind of just rely on how the story plays out, like saying, hey, this YouTube video .wmv definitely dates certain aspects of the story. Do
definitely
you kind of
disclaimer
rely
for
on that?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
disclaimer.
Yeah,
And just because I
I
feel
feel
like
like
that.
disclaimer's absolutely appropriate.
Mm-hmm. So, because you have new people coming, and it's like, well, when is this actually like made? So like that kind of preservation comes in that way.
Yeah, there's also a chance there's people that don't know about Ben Drowned. They just stumble upon this video, and
Mm-hmm.
without that, they can be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
So who knows?
We also
That's
have
really the
Yeah, I was-
dream, just to get new people who don't know anything about it to watch this video and to have that be their first experience with it. That's the goal. I wanted this to be the definitive way to experience it.
Well, you got it.
I was gonna ask you, do you think it's mostly like people who already know about it that are watching the video, or do you get a lot of people commenting about them like encountering it for the first time?
I don't recall any comments saying that this was their first time. There could be some, but definitely by far the majority are people who already know it.
Yeah.
I'm going through the comment now to try and find if anyone said it's the first time.
Tripa Tepis says
And-
that they've been trying to get people, new players, to schedule a time to watch it with them, I guess synchronously. And so, like, hey, I mean, I could see that. I could see showing this to people at a party and it being like, an academic party, not like a real party. All right, we're not taking shots to this, but like sitting down and it's like a movie.
I might.
Take a shot every time you do
Now the
smoke a
Moon
soul
Children arc, that shit gets. No, I'm joking. We can talk. It's not what we're
Take a
doing.
shot for every
That's
typo.
interesting.
Take a shot for every typo. Take a shot for every time Kelbers steals someone's bike.
Dead.
You'll take one
I'll
good
I'll
shot.
still get drunk. Oh, also, I hope you don't mind me hijacking this for a moment. I think it's a good time to shout out the people in chat who were part of this project, because there's a good chunk of them down there. Like, we have Rosie, we have Tokyo in there. I think I can't read their name. It's really dark. I think that's Tokyo. Yep, Tokyo.
Torquio, yeah.
There's Latches. He's here. Get high. Watch Fandom. And also, Tripitepis down there had about 2 seconds of dialogue. That's something that no one ever talks about, is the fact that she replied to the original 4chan post and got a canon reply from Jad. No one ever talks about that. We included that. So
It's a great cameo, honestly. It's really good.
it really is. She's literally the first canon player.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really funny actually, because like I didn't realize the first time that Tripitepis had come into chat that was who that was, and so I was like, oh man, canon player, so Awakening stuff, right? And it's like, no, this is, I mean, especially now, given the shit that's going on in Awakening. I know my co-hosts don't know about this yet. They will. it feels like that is more monumental to me, at least in retrospect, than it was before Awakening. You know?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Also, Shy's down there.
I believe I saw Tokyo as
I
well.
have to go back and see if anyone else showed up. I just love that all the people involved are showing up. That just warms my heart.
You've got a good team. You've got a that's and there's a good question in there actually, and that is like, and I think Diego had said something to this effect in the questions. I'm not going to quote verbatim, but I'm sure Diego can follow up if there's like specific stuff. How did you coordinate this? Like, what was the level of work that went in either to voice direction, as an artist on the team, Rotted, the the art direction side of things, and as the general director, you Circle, your direction capabilities. Like, how much talking back and forth was there to actually get the team to cohere?
And how many people were on the team? Just as
Yeah.
another extra question.
All right. So, in terms of voice direction, that was Zed's whole thing. He did like the vast majority of voice stuff regarding how other people did their stuff. I had somewhat of an input on that. There were a couple of things that I didn't really touch on that front because I'm no expert in that field. I don't think any of us really are, but so that part, that's more of a Zed question. As for the art, all of that was me in a group chat with 9 other people, and for the most part, it was extremely streamlined. Everyone had their deadlines for when to have their art finished by. Everyone. It was extremely smooth. There were almost no problems.
Almost.
Almost. There was a slight problem that it ended up fixing itself. And music. That was probably the component that I had the most input in, is that Latches and I just sat there and workshopped this stuff for hours and hours and hours. And I am just so glad that he doesn't hate me for the amount of things where I was like, hey, I have an idea. And he had already spent 3 hours on a track. Like, I make him change something. But the way it came out is just
So
perfect.
now that we've asked how many people, I think people always forget just the scope of things. How long did it also take to do all of this? Right, because I'm just all about work and labor. So I'm trying to kind of get a grasp on how do you work as you produce fan content and through fan labor.
From the point that we conceived this project to its completion was somewhere around 6 or 7 months, but in terms of actual work, like scripting, casting, art, all of that took place within 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the number of people involved. Oh, sorry, Zed, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's always been a concept that we've juggled with for a while, and then when we knuckled down, so to speak, and worked on it, I'd say it was about 3 months.
Yeah, it took a lot of time. Yeah.
And the amount of people involved, there were 10 or 11 artists total. 6 voice actors. Latches did the music, and there were a few people who contributed small things that I also credited in like the special thanks, but it was probably around 20.
The production.
Yeah.
Production.
It's bigger than I thought.
I think sometimes we see, for some reason, with like YouTube videos, and we just don't tend to look at how much work they are. Because you think about how many people, like that's a lot of people to coordinate with. How do you maintain coherence in a group chat that large, right? How do you navigate the work aspect and communication with that many people?
Say it was dividing our forces that helped, if that makes sense. Like, if we have someone covering the art, I covered the voicing, and then someone directing the entire thing, it helps to spread the workload, and then each, not as necessarily leader, but spokesperson of said faction can discuss the progress with each part of it, really.
So there was
So.
was there like a handoff of certain parts of the project then? How was the like the voice and the visual aspect, the art aspect, how were those kind of brought together? How did you guys go about doing that?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I have no idea how we did it.
It just happened. It just happened.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Just
A miracle.
It's not something that I ever really thought about. It's just like, I'm currently thinking about this, so this needs to be done. And then we did it. And we just repeated that process for everything that needed to be done. And somehow it worked.
You know,
Yeah, there was
Diego. Sorry, go ahead. I shouldn't.
it's okay. Yeah, there was some point I believe in production that we were really stuck because we didn't know if we could get either enough artists or because I believe with voice actors we had enough, but for the visual aspect that was basically what this video was gonna be carried with, we didn't know. I think Circle was actually struggling to find someone to fit the slots that we needed.
It's true. There was a point where there was a lot that needed to be shown. I wasn't comfortable having the same frame on screen for longer than 20 seconds at a time. That's part of it, I guess. But finding the extra couple of artists to really, I don't know, fill it out, that was a problem for a bit. And eventually I did just resort to begging.
Yeah, I believe the artists that made the Drawn Majora's Mask gameplay, they came super late and it was a super clutch from what I remember.
Yeah,
It,
that's
it was
actually Latches'
insane.
friend that I
Yeah,
didn't even know.
thanks to them, it was insane, honestly.
I was actually gonna ask, how did you guys find people? Like, was it on Discord? Was it like friends? Like, I guess how did the community develop? So then,
so
like, when you actually wanted to do the project, you had people, you know?
we all met in Awakening, and we all have like individual like talents, I'll say, and we actually banded together and made a group. And then through that, we have communications from each member to other people, and that's kind of how we got people together for the project. So we already had this group established. We all had our respective aspects that we wanted to do, artists, writers, voice actors. So we already had like a small team from the start, and then we expanded it, included other people for the project. So having the team at the start helped a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess a question that I think is on here that like how did you guys kind of maintain the general like oh voice, I'll get that in a second. And the general voice of the project and like keeping it sufficiently creepy but also like not super like drawn out, I would say, cuz sometimes people reading stories take forever to get to the actual story. But like how did you kind of maintain your voice throughout like the a lot of artists, voice actors, etc. Like how did you kind of maintain a voice throughout that?
Yeah, this is a good time to mention that Latches is the goat. Uh, this man sounds a lot like Alex Hall. Uh, so he that was a big part of it. Actually, he sounds a lot like the man who actually wrote the story. So having him be the voice of Jedusible was sort of like it had a twofold effect. First of all, it's extremely realistic, and just the way he reads is very concise and good and not drawn out like a lot of people are. It just works. It's hard to explain. It just works.
So what I'm hearing is that if you ever need to do more digital fireside YouTube poops, then you can just have Latches dub your lines, and then you can just make them come out of Alex's mouth.
Just make an AI at this point, honestly.
You're not wrong.
The YouTube poop is by the fire, then it's really going to be bad.
Oh no! I actually, it's some of this stuff I will mention. And like, we'll get to it later, guys. But digital firesides are like this weird podcasting thing that Alex Hall was doing for a while. Between, I think it started in 2012 or 2011.
Those started in 2019.
Oh, they're very recent. I thought he started.
Yeah, they're very recent.
Oh, okay.
Nah.
Yeah. Well, it's between the two arcs, but I guess on the back end. So my mistake. I make mistakes all the time. I'm sure I drive Circle crazy about that sort of thing. Yeah,
actually.
There was a half joke question from Soren in the chat I wanted to throw at you now, which I don't think will break things up too much. I have to go find it though. There's so many chat messages. Holy crap, you guys are amazing.
Chat is popping.
Chat
so
is
you gotta
popping.
go find it.
Yeah.
Of course, you're gonna let Soren bully me here.
The lore implications of Goku, Miku, and Stephen King when you get a chance.
So let's start with Hatsune Miku.
In the beginning, only Hatsune Miku.
Eons ago.
So in the group chat with the artists, we needed to decorate Jedusible's room. Okay. So we thought about things that he would be interested in. It's on record that he was a big Devil May Cry fan. So we threw up Devil May Cry posters on his wall, and it was Jester's idea to add Miku as well. So it seemed like every artist put different posters on his wall, with the exception of one. The only thing that remained consistent on his wall throughout the entire thing is this one poorly drawn picture of Goku. But yeah, they all drew Miku. They all had Devil May Cry posters on his wall in different places, in different designs. But Goku is the one thing that remained consistent.
You know, I noticed the posters, and as someone who's like in high school at 2010s and 2011s, the new people who were really into Devil May Cry, Miku and Goku definitely were involved in their interests. So it's accurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fuck continuity.
Continuity. Yeah.
What's that?
Part of that was my compulsive need to have continuity between people's shots. We actually had a diagram of the way his room was laid out. Not everyone followed that to a T. It was for the most part, but in my head I just sort of thought, you know what? Unreliable narrator, shifting mental state. It's justified.
Right.
So
And
it all worked out in the end. We got our means too.
Yeah, and I'll just ask, so what, for you all who are making this, what kind of a person is Jedusible in the first arc of the Haunted cartridge? Like, how would you describe him as a character outside of, I mean, Miku, Goku, and Devil May Cry already tells you a lot, I think, but outside of that?
Typical 2010 meme lord.
Yeah. I mean, he was a 4chan user, so you tell me.
Yeah, that says it all.
So do you like, was it just a process, I guess, for how much direction went into the voice acting then? You know, how much was there actually like a push towards, hey, you know, could you do this take better, or did this work for you, or did everything really? I mean, you said Latches just kind of went in and did it, which is impressive. I mean, that's insane, frankly. But like for especially for other smaller roles, were there multiple takes? How did it come together?
So there were a lot of lines. Funnily enough, it was mostly the lines that had the cast that had fewer lines, where I asked a lot of the time, like, "Oh, could you do a line like this? Could you do a line with this emotion? Could you do a line with emphasis on this specific part?" Because I wanted to see which one suited the conversations that happened better, and which one just flowed with the narrative better, which one like provided the most emotion. And it wasn't just my opinion. I did ask for others because I didn't want it to be just me. But yeah, it was about checking to see what was the best approach with all the lines. But the longer lines, I basically checked the more emotive parts later on. When, like, for example, with Deducible, when he starts freaking out towards the end, I wanted to really make sure that the voice was proper, genuine in its emotion, that you could feel like almost the same fear Deducible had. So yeah, that's it really. Yeah, yeah.
I think that's kind of a bonus of it being in a video format, going from a text format to video. You get the chance of being like, well, you get the ability to act a little bit and be like, hey, let's add some more, emotion to text, because, in general, you're just reading something and you're like, oh, cool. But having it voiced, you kind of get the more impact of it. So I think you did
Yeah,
a
I
really
mean,
good job with that.
when we were reading it, like it wasn't good at all.
No, we sucked. We were not good readers. I'll give it that. It's so hard to do a good reading on your first shot. I mean, I've been doing poetry for years. I can't read my own poetry. Are you fucking crazy? It's my poetry.
No, I'm the same, seriously, don't worry.
But it is like, it's not hard to
So-
imagine. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, part of my struggle with it is because, like, it's 10 years old. It's so much part of internet lore that's, like, sometimes hard to take seriously. In a way, just because, like, I grew up with it, right? And so, like, I know about it. So I was wondering how you guys, like, try to approach that while, like, giving it, like, a tone, like, how to keep that consistent throughout.
Take it seriously, but it's also still kind of cheesy. Like, how do you kind of balance
I
That
guess
is
how
where
do you-
the art comes in.
That's okay.
We had the voice played completely straight, and occasionally we'd sprinkle out funny things in the art to see if anyone would notice.
Okay.
So that was sort of how we handled it. There's actually one continuity error that completely got past me until the video was rendering, and no one has pointed it out. I hesitate to even tell you what it is, but once you notice it, it's hilarious.
I'm really curious what it is now.
You know what? I'll just go ahead and tell you. In one of Felix's panels, the N64 controller has two thumbsticks.
Oh,
right.
God,
I
yeah.
remember.
No.
Alternate timelines. Who knows?
Yeah, that's on the
Only
same
one of
level.
them.
Only one.
That's a continuity error on the level of what is it? Oh man. So I'm weirdly transfixed by all the Marble Hornets production lore. And there's like a couple moments where they didn't get the window rolled up or rolled down right between shots. So you're just like watching the window go, woo, on the car. It's
God.
What do you
amazing.
mean?
Oh man.
Rosie just called it Felix's N65 controller.
Oh, that was
great. I watched it again today, and the line where he's like, "Oh, I got GoldenEye," and in parentheses it's "fuck yeah," and just the way that he delivered, like "fuck yeah," it was very like. I was like, "That's the way to voice that."
You really have to tackle these as a voice actor to get a line to work out, because I cannot imagine Latches when he reads the script. He reads 3 lines saying the same thing. Fuck you, Ben. I don't want to talk with you again and again. You need to have a very good status to be like, okay, how do I make this good? Which is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, the GoldenEye fuck yeah is such a like I call this like a high risk thing. Like that's a high risk line. That's like there's every possibility you throw that into something and it sucks and it just tears the immediate like the moment apart. And that take is soundboard worthy. It's fucking amazing. It's a great take.
I remember.
Like... Sorry.
Oh, so go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I feel like the reason that the line works in the narrative is because, if I'm not wrong, it's relatively early in the story before things start going completely wrong. So he is still just an excited college kid who wants to play some GoldenEye. If it was later on, when he's being terrorized by Ben, that he was like, "Oh yeah, fuck yeah, GoldenEye," that would be completely breaking the moment.
Yeah, it's believable. It's believable, honestly.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how somebody on 4chan in 2010 would say that, right? Like if they got GoldenEye.
Until
Oh,
everyone
man.
realized that GoldenEye doesn't really hold up.
No.
Awesome.
Those are fighting words.
I didn't grow up with Nintendo, so I guess I come at it from a growing up with Halo perspective, and it just doesn't, it's just not a good
I'd
game.
say
Mouse
perfect
and
start to
keyboard
a
mod, that's
3DS.
all I'm saying.
Yeah, but you're British.
I am British. Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. Asterisk. That is.
Oh no, people are leaving the chat because
we're
you
losing
said
followers
GoldenEye
because,
sucks.
yeah.
Morgan, how dare you?
No.
Twitch is revolting. We can't have this.
we're getting canceled.
So I should toss out the question. I think this has been floating around to literalize it, and maybe each one of you takes your stance on this differently. I have an idea of how Circle's going to answer because we did a very long form interview about the Jujusable wiki that never came out. But what was your ethos going into making this? Like, I know, Circle, you had mentioned you wanted it to be the wiki, but kind of audio-visual. But, like, when choosing what to put in, when choosing how what was going to be represented, what was, like, the guiding element there, if you will?
There is no amount of information present in the first arc of the story that didn't make it into this video in some way. It's all there. It's complete. That's what I'm going for. If it's anything other than complete, I did something wrong.
Including the tags.
Yes. Sorry, I keep having to adjust my camera.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expect that from you specifically, because I know you have a very particular stance to the wiki, which is, remarkable. It really is like a substantial amount of effort to attempt, to have everything. Actually, since we have you on, I should just ask, is there anything that you need for the wiki that you'd like to announce to the 23 to 26 viewers that are currently watching, just in case somebody has it?
This is a good way to make me cry. We are still missing the info from the About page. That was still never found. We still need the About information. Rip Neko. There are unsolved puzzles that still need solved. You've seen that document. You know how hard it is. One of those is probably an Enigma cipher, so that's probably never going to be solved. Nothing else really comes to mind in terms of lost content except for that one page.
I'm kind of fascinated now by this kind of weird place that you're actually in, because do you see finding these things as you playing the ARG, or is this now like an effort of labor because you want to produce the content? Or do you not see a distinction there?
I think in its own way it is considered playing because there's still things to solve and things to do. It's just nothing that's going to progress the story. For instance, there is a cipher that went unsolved for almost 10 years. I solved it. Not sure how accurate that is with retrospect, how some of the story elements in Awakening played out. But when I announced that I solved it, Jed himself tweeted, "Wow, I didn't think you'd actually solve it without the key you were supposed to have." So I guess, I don't know. It didn't really do anything for the story since it was already complete, but it was still nice to have that lore that may or may not be actually real.
Yeah.
At this point.
Ephraim kind of makes a good point. Like it's the 100% completion post game, like making sure you get all the achievements and find all the little nitty gritty bits and pieces.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, yeah, I definitely call it playing even till now because Ball, in my opinion, he doesn't like add useless information. Like one subtle line that we find can change an entire thesis on what we thought was going on. So these like little pieces of information, they're not just like add-ons for archival sake. They are also possibly core components of, even though it's completed, the story.
Really interesting.
That does make me like wonder. Because with some ARGs, it's like it seems like the story is like not necessarily solid in the minds of the creators. It seems like this isn't a problem with this ARG in particular, but like I wonder what you guys think of as like distinction between like Jad and the various authors who are like creating this story, like that relationship. Because like when you were talking about it, you were saying like when Jad posts these things, and I'm thinking like, well, isn't it like Alex Hall or another author posting these things? So I was just wondering what you guys thought about that.
99%. 99% of this entire thing is all Alex Hall's story. There is 1% that was written by Cade Hendricks, Ryukaki, who famously had a yelling match with him on the Within Hubris forum and was promptly decanonized. Alex Hall can say it's not canon all he wants. It's not true. I don't care. No, on the wiki we deem it as ambiguously canon, but
Dubious.
yeah, there is a canon account on that forum named Ryukaki. You can't take that back. The character's canon. Whether his story actually happened the way it did or not, that's up for debate, because it could have just been some dude. That's some way to interpret it, but
It all comes down to how Awakening players become canon and how some of them can actually be like, wait, then if I'm canon, what's my story, right? And I think Ryukaki saw not an opportunity, but saw like a chance of going like, hey, what if I do this? And I think it turned out great, honestly. I think it's not bad.
Yeah, I think there's almost a question that starts to get evoked. So this is on our side of things where it's like, you know, what constitutes an avatar, right? At what point do you have an avatar in the game? And at a later point, it's gonna, you know, that becomes, I think, very literal for people like Circle, right? Who become actual figures in Majora's Mask. But, you know, in these early days where you have like the name, is the name enough in an ARG to have an avatar per se? And I'm not sure, because it's not a question I've ever asked myself outside of now. So I guess this interview is doing cool things. But, you know, I mean, if a name is enough to be canon, then for you all who are the players, then one has to assume that it's enough to have an avatar in the world.
I agree with that.
But then also, if the creator of the thing doesn't see it as canon, but the fans do, then who's the real author?
So that's the nature of non-fiction, really. because just as the author has crossed over to be this character, the players also cross over to be characters in the story.
Yeah. I was just thinking about like Tripa Tepis, right? How like the intention of replying to Jad wasn't like to be in the story, right? But it ends up being in the story.
Yeah.
That's just another way like all the lines are really blurry and interesting when it comes to this stuff.
Well, it's like when we were talking to Stockroach, we were like, well, what happened? What happened, like, if they went off, if the audience went off the rails, would you have followed them? And Stockroach was like, well, I don't know. Luckily, the community didn't go off the rails, so I didn't have to answer that question. But if they did, I think I would have had to move and change what I was doing. So yeah.
Literally D&D.
Yeah.
Very much.
That's a good.
It's
Because like
funny.
when
They
you're
are very similar, actually.
yeah, because
We
like
used-
the ARG author is like the DM, who's
Yeah,
like
in Awakening, we used to separate player Jad from Game Master Jad, which is obviously the actual author, Alex Hall. Used to call him literally GM Jad.
Jad M, as it turns out. So I want to take, since we're doing the interview, we usually go straight through, as you guys know if you watch, but I want to take like a 5-minute break and just give you guys a chance to grab water or anything like that. We'll be right back, and I want to pick up with Undercover Police Officer Ifrit, since it's a promise that I've made. So there you go, Circle. That's what we're doing when we come back. 5-minute break. See you all, and see you guys, the audience, in just a moment. All right.
Got my baby.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for allowing us a quick break. Now, to jump back into it, here's Circle Hunter with the story of undercover police officer Ifrit.
Right, so undercover police officer Ifrit. The best thing that came out of Awakening. So what happened with that was, one day, Alex Hall comes out and says, "Hey, do any of you have anything to do with the Ben Drowned Wikipedia page?" That was my first time hearing about that. I didn't know that existed. I didn't write it, so I'm scared to look at it. So a few of us went to go check it out, and boy, did they butcher that story. Nothing there was accurate. In fact, they had one of the characters that you have yet to meet, Ifrit, listed as an undercover police officer, and that just became the thing, I guess. It was hilarious, and cleaning up that page was a nightmare because there's someone who wanted to get into an edit war with us.
Oh, that.
It was fun.
Thanks.
We had this is another thing I learned about during our 2-hour conversation forever ago, that this edit war had happened in the first place. It's remarkable to me that somebody, like, because you were not on the talk page, you were not quiet about who you were, right? Like, they knew that you were the person who runs the fan wiki. Which
yeah, I was like, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is what you need to stop doing.
Oh man, yeah, it's a good story.
It didn't work.
So to jump back into kind of the stuff about the dub in question, right? I did want to just toss over to David and ask if there were any like fan labor specific questions that had come to mind for you over the course of listening to this, because I know you are the resident fan scholar expert.
No, not that I can think of. I think we kind of covered most of what I was wondering.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I will go to the question list then. We'll see what we can do. What have we not covered on our question list? Wow, we have actually covered a lot of this already. Remarkably so. Yes, okay, here's a good one. So, you guys, after finishing the Haunted Cartridge dub, what parts of the dub were actually the most, what parts are you the most proud of, either individually or as a team? Were there favorite parts of working on the project in general? And were there any parts of the project that were distinctly like, I want to bang my head against the wall, this sucks?
So, there's this one part. I specifically showed you what this looked like on the video timeline.
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, this by far took me the longest to do because I am not a professional video editor by any means. I'm just flying by the seat of my pants here. I had to animate text. I had to animate a Cleverbot conversation. And I had to sync it to the dialogue and keep everything lined up perfectly. That was the most tedious work ever. And yet it was the only way I knew or wanted to illustrate that conversation. In story, he used Cleverbot. There's no other way to illustrate that. So that's just what I had to do. And I had to suffer through it. And it was not fun.
As I recall, the problem in question was that you weren't aware of keyframes before you started doing that part.
No.
Yes, I don't know. I know nothing. I learned the basics of how animating works to do this.
Hey, but now you know, at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of some of the question that I had, right? Because now you know, how has your experience with the first arc, right? How are you approaching or how have you approached this new work that you're doing now? How is that like what parts of your work processes, right, have you changed? What are you keeping the same? What did you really like about how you did it but the first arc?
Thankfully, nothing else that needs to be done is going to require that level of work at this point. Everything that needs to be illustrated on screen, for the most part, has been done, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. All I have to do is put it on screen. Now, there are some things that I'm going to have to. There's an archive of the website that comes up in the next part of the story. We have a page that originally had a countdown timer on it. But after the countdown, it started counting up from the moment that it hit 0. So now I have to find a way to make it display a countdown to a date in the past, and that's going to be a challenge.
You gotta do it like what is it, Prison Break? Is that the one where they're like, I think that's a TV show that you're like going back in time or something. There's always like the clock in the maybe I'm saying
Are you
this
talking about
wrong.
24?
24, yeah, 24, that show.
Yeah.
24, yeah.
Where they just have that like every like cutscene or something, they just have like a huge just like countdown timer displaying what time it is. It's gonna be like
Yeah,
that.
it was just this page that had a countdown timer at the top of it that counted down to like 9 p.m. the next day. And now I don't know how to illustrate this without just creating a whole new timer and recording it. It's going to be this whole thing that I have to figure out.
I'm sure you could just. Okay, but bear in mind, I'm also not a video editing guru by any means. You could just make a timer and then just overlay the text for the date, surely.
I could do that, were it not for the part where scrolling over the timer reveals more text.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I've thought about it.
Yeah, this is actually a really good question in terms of moving forward, right? I mean, a lot of Moon Children is not on a static web page. I mean, it's on a static web page, but it's on a static web page that is doing like minor updates here and there. So are all of those things moving forward? What's the plan? Is the plan to do like Cleverbot level animation, or is it to show different like static images of the different states of the website?
For the most part, it's going to be pretty much imagine how the art was handled, except this time with images of the website. So just like a pan or a zoom in. It's really low effort for this part of the story.
And just for me, can you put into context for me the first time, I guess, when you originally went through the haunted cartridge, right? And then worked on this project, went through, like, what is your own personal timeline on working on this project and then going through the ARGs?
How do you mean?
So this is, did you experience the ARG, the haunted cartridge in 2010? And then, right, so like, what is your own timeline of when you found it, when you went through it, when you started working on this project, when you started working on this next project, how you went through that? Like, what is the timeline? What is the context here?
Okay. So it happened in September of 2010. Then Moon Children happened later the same month, and it continued into early next year. I found the story in probably February of 2011, when Within Hubris actually came into existence. I didn't know about Within Hubris until maybe a month or two later, so I was a latecomer. I didn't experience it as it happened, and that was part of this whole thing where I regretted not being a little earlier to experience it. So I had to rely on others to relay the story to me in roughly the order that these things happened. the timeline on the wiki was not very comprehensive at all. I rewrote that several times with new information that I'd come across, and every few years I'd find something new and add it. And then, after a certain point, it became extremely comprehensive to the point that there is not much I can think of to add to the timeline that isn't already there. And then Awakening happened, and I was able to experience part of the story. And now we're here. Like I said earlier, we conceived this story sometime early last year after the birthday project.
Yeah.
And at that point, I sort of had like this rough timeline of when I wanted each video to come out, because I chose significant dates. That didn't happen because the original scheduled date for Moon Children was
A couple weeks ago, right? Or tomorrow?
Last week. Yeah. It was actually supposed to come out on the 18th.
18th.
Yeah. That didn't happen. I'm not even finished scripting the thing yet. Burnout is real.
Yeah, absolutely.
So about the other
Yeah,
the other set of you, did you guys all? When did you come into the Jedusible mythos, if you will?
Like when we joined the story, do you mean? Like started
Yeah,
playing?
like when did you start playing in general?
So this is a funny story. I was probably I must have been 12 when I first came across Ben Drowned and I started experiencing the Moon Children arc while reading through, I should say, right when Deducible started changing videos titles to "If You Hear Me, For You See Me." That's literally when I found it, when he was doing King Kong.
What a moment to come in on! Oh
I
my
know.
god.
But then another funny story is I was literally just talking to my friend one day. I think it would have been March 28th, which was when Sonata.wmv came out. I think that's the date. And I was literally just messaging her like, "Oh, I miss Ben Drowned. I'm gonna check it out." And then I go on YouTube, type in Ben Drowned, new video premiering in 15 minutes. I was like, "What?" And then I have been literally obsessed with it for 2020 since then. Like, could not get my eyes off it for a second. That's how I got into it.
For me, kind of similar. I mean, I knew about Ben Drowned around 12, 11, I'd say. That's when I first noticed. And then it's like, it was cool. I was, oh, it's really cool. I forgot about it. Years passed. And then I see a video from, I believe it was Nightmind. Yeah, I saw that video. I was wondering, oh shit, there's more to this shit, right? I forgot about again. And then I was like, hey, wasn't there supposed to be a follow-up to Ben Drown? And I looked it up and I see him recommended the cryptic videos for Arc 3 that he was posting. I was like, oh shit. So I joined the server and then it went all downhill from there. I was never the same.
Yeah, it's
Never the same.
it's really funny actually, like, because my own experience was that I came in, I think in 2015, and I thought John is Dead was Ben Drowned because I was an idiot, and then I watched the Nightmind video and I was like, wait, hold on, this isn't what I remember. And then at the right before Awakening, I found the Bro Gaming server somehow. And I think there were a couple infuriating conversations, probably for Circle, where Circle was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because I had gotten the two all betwixt each other. So for people who don't know, John is Dead is the fan expansion to the original 2012 story. And I think they also did some expanding on Awakening when Awakening was happening at the same time as John is Dead. But I don't keep up with John is Dead these days.
So John is Dead, it started as sort of like a spin-off, not really truly a sequel. It wasn't intended to be a sequel. It was sort of supposed to be its own thing that just sort of loosely tied in. And it uses elements of Ben Drowned, but it is entirely its own story.
It's not a thing you want to get confused with the original Ben Drowned. And so there was a lot of like interesting back and forth there. So different people in the team came in at different times, and I kind of wonder, just to build off of that line of inquiry, is there like a notable difference that you see in players' engagement or understanding of the story between those who came in, what in the Awakening era versus those who came in the Within Hubris and X days?
Well, there's a fundamental difference in a lot of them, because a lot of them were children. In 2010, you'll see him in the chat, Argdov in there. He was the youngest Within Hubris member for a while. He is now he's now a man, and and now he's no longer our little baby Argdov. And now there are 14-year-olds Within Hubris currently, and I'm just like getting old here. So that's probably the biggest fundamental difference between them. In terms of how they comprehend the story, yeah, that too. A lot of the younger ones just don't have that context. They weren't there for it, and
Well, I feel like
there's a lot of factors to it.
Like me coming into it, because I've just been on the internet for, I don't know, my whole life, I guess. And I was like 14 and 10. I wasn't 14, I was like 13 and 10 or 11. And so I wasn't around or like been drowned areas, but coming back to it, I was on the internet 2010, 2011. So I have the context of the story within the internet of 2010, 2011. But I feel like the kids who are coming into it at like 14 now have no idea what the internet was 2010, 2011. So they have a different context from even an outsider who's coming in older versus a younger person coming in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was just a different place, a different time, and they don't understand how it was.
It was an absolutely different world. Sorry.
I just had to explain to someone that you had to find the music video and hope there wasn't a weird intro or dialogue in it before you converted it from YouTube to MP3. And so, because you wouldn't buy, I had to explain to someone that you either bought your songs for $1.29 on Apple Music or whatever, or you YouTube to MP3'd it, and that's just so far removed now that I had to explain that to someone. I had to explain the historical context of YouTube to MP3 or LimeWire, right?
I still do some Johto to MP3 to this day, honestly.
I
remember I always searched up the song lyrics, so it'd always be a lyric video. Yeah, so it wouldn't have any of the intros.
I remember back in the day when they started muting videos, because Viacom started to get on their butts. They started muting videos. I'm like, why does this video have music in it and like any sound? Because it was the early Content ID days. Oh boy. But
oh man, yeah, this whole ARG is such a trip back. Like, it's really hard to grasp what Haunted Cartridge would have felt like if you weren't back, at least in one ARG community in 2010, 2011, or on the internet doing creepypasta stuff, which thankfully I think a lot of us were. It was hard to avoid creepypasta stuff in 2010, 2011, I felt like, personally. But I also was up the Marble Hornets train, so,
yeah,
my recommendations were creepypasta readings on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. I guess I had a question, like, for coming in like at 11 or 12 to these, stumbling upon ARGs, like, how does that change your understanding of the internet, I guess, coming into it at an early age and then following it as it progresses? Like, how did that affect your guys' understanding of the internets, I guess?
That's a good question.
Well, it was really one of the first things that I ever experienced on unrestricted internet. As a kid, I didn't really have access to the internet very often at all. It was very rare. And at the age of 14, I went to go spend a couple of nights at a friend's house, and we had unrestricted internet access there, and it was just like a whole new world opened up to me. And at that point, I knew how nothing worked. And boy, was I cringe. Some might say I still am, but at that point, that was one of the first things I experienced. I feel like that colored my uh, experience to come in some way.
Yeah, so many people start either with Newgrounds or just YouTube in general or Tumblr, honestly. And man, you just see so many stuff that you even in that time you cannot even comprehend. And you see, oh shit, a video about a haunted game. Let's watch it, and then you get fucking traumatized. Which is
Yeah.
why I think uh, in 2010 there was a lot of kids that were just, oh, the internet, what is this? And then they saw that video, and of course they didn't get the whole story of it, but they get the gist of it. The Elegy of Emptiness is super fucking scary, right? And
I think.
it's just very
Oh, sorry.
interesting. Oh, go ahead.
I think a big part of it is that it evokes that sense of wonder that you will still have as a child. Like, I was a very creative, imaginative child. I hopefully still am a creative, imaginative adult. But when you first find it, and, like the ARG itself, when I first found it, I was like, oh my god, there's this a game that you play in real life. It's essentially LARPing, but it's was incredible to me. I was so jealous that I missed out on the Moon Children arc because it seemed so just amazing.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
was kind of blown away, really, by the so I guess it's not necessarily simplistic because it does take a lot of effort, but just the idea of just playing this was so like wow to me.
Yeah. I
I
think
think
my first interaction with ARGs was with the DLC because that game had some very good secrets in it, and there was a community that just made up RGs from fan content, and that was the first interaction I had with RGs, and I noticed that wow, this is an actual medium, and then I found out what the fuck, Ben Drown is an RG as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember the first ARG I took part in was if you do you guys know who Siva Gunner is, the YouTube music guy who makes the video game music parodies? Yeah, he did an
Mhm.
ARG back in, I want to say, I'm gonna lie right now when I say this, I think it was 2015, and it was so fun with every new puzzle that came out, trying to find it out, pieces of mysteries. I've always loved the idea of a story being a puzzle to solve, like through obviously other puzzles and riddles. It was so fun.
Mhm.
I also just want to point out real quick, Ben Drowned was referenced in one of his King for a Day videos. One of his rips,
Yes.
Unhealed, if you
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really
it was,
hard
it was a
to
Song of Healing rip.
it's really hard to explain to people, I think, because this is something like the point of this whole show has been to try to emulate the feeling of playing an ARG for people for ARGs that are done, going beat by beat, and you can't do that. Like it's functionally impossible. But one of the things that I absolutely like, I could never recreate, I don't think, without doing some immensely complicated video work, is the feeling of how small the internet was compared to how it is now, and how when the internet was smaller or felt smaller because there were less, it was less hyper mediated than it is now. The ARGs felt kind of bigger because it was like it was easier, at least for me, to suspend my disbelief back in those days, not just because I was a child, but because there really wasn't more to the internet than it felt like what Ben Drown was doing, in those earlier days.
Yeah. And I think
Just to use
there's
one example, but of course, for me, that goes to Marble Hornets, and Marble Hornets felt very real to me then, and I don't think it would now.
And
Yeah.
I think there's a certain naivety back then, definitely, because like when Slenderman, I was around when Slenderman came out, and I totally was like, I bought into it. I'm like, yeah, there's folk tales in Britain about this guy who walks around on playgrounds. He's creepy. Sweet. Okay. Makes sense. Like my brain was like, yeah, this is totally a thing that happened. And for a long time, I just assumed that it was real until someone's like, no, it's just made up. I'm like, oh, well,
I was
okay.
Yeah, I was very paranoid about Slenderman when I was a kid, man.
Yeah.
Same.
I always kept looking behind me because it really fucked me up. It was like,
And there's definitely that naivety that's like, oh yeah, this is totally something that could happen. And I think it was a real big shock because I was in Milwaukee in 2014 when the stabbing happened about Slenderman. I was like,
Oh God.
oh, that's a thing. Oh no, like people actually like internalized it and it made it into this horrible thing that happened. But nowadays I think the internet is much more everything's fake. Like there's an inherent
Yeah.
assumption on the internet that everything is not real. Whereas back then it was
Everything's real.
everything's real, or this could be real. But now it's like nothing is real until proven otherwise. Back then it
Yeah.
was like, this is probably real.
I feel like that's the reason why so many content creators and artists have just chosen to make web series, right? Because they just know it's impossible to make this in this age right now something believable. Like back then when the internet was fresh and no one knew what was real, what was not. But now it's super hard. And that's why I think it's very interesting that now people just say it's a web series and ooh. A good example is Mandela Catalog,
Yeah.
which is amazing. It's super scary. It does a well spin on the body snatcher, which is super old. It goes super back then. And the way the videos are made, it has the same feeling when I watch Ben Drown the first time. It was like, I don't know what's happening. What am I watching? Like there's this scary feel that you get, which is I really like it. I really like it.
It's it's funny, because I think a lot of the discussions, not that we have on here, but I have with other ARG makers, is like other ARG makers, like I am one yet. It's in the works, guys, and maybe in 2 years. Of people who make ARGs and people who cover ARGs, is TINAG. TINAG is always the cornerstone of the discussion, and I think like having this conversation with you guys has really made me rethink my take on TINAG, which has been since I got started into like critting and trying to figure this stuff out, which was in 2016. Just in my personal life and writing essays for school and stuff, was TINAG is bullshit. It's not really a core part of ARGs. But I mean, if you're existing in that 2011, 2010, pre-2010 internet context, I mean, TINAG is going to feel more like a definitional component because, hell, that's the internet. Everything could be real.
You explain that, Ren?
Oh, what TINAG is? Yeah, this is not a game. The rule, the aesthetic of ARGs in which you say, hey, this isn't a real. This is a real thing. It's not a game, and you assure the audience that in some way, either visually or auditorily or verbally. Ben Drown does this at the beginning of the Haunted Cartridge, where he's like, "Hey, this isn't just a joke. This is my life." Yeah. I mean, it's falling out of fashion.
So I bet you're wondering how I ended up here.
I don't want to know how Alex Hall met my mother. I hope that didn't happen.
as Jedusable is like diving out a window with the cartridge in his hand.
I wonder how you think that I've got here. And he's just like sitting like in a frame, like, no.
What could possibly go wrong?
No, don't quote Bubsy.
And I think another reason like TINAG worked in the internet is that the like modding community, well, especially like Ben Drown, like modding community wasn't really a huge thing in 2010, as well as like the knowledge to do CGI or like make really believable fake things was not a thing in 2010. Yeah. You saw something and you went, that's bad CGI because you didn't have enough budget to make good CGI. It's fake.
And like trolls weren't really it was like people weren't trolling necessarily. There were just people on the internet who were like shitty because they hated things, but it didn't feel like there were people who were actively trying to deceive as much as they are now.
There was pardon my French, shit posters. And now there's active like con men.
Right. And I feel like that's part of now how we're experiencing the internet is that we kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt, because back then it wasn't like it was just people with really shitty opinions that you could just like ignore. Or like just hating and like downvoting.
I feel like part of it. I say part of it too, right? Is that there always were scammers, but now it's so baked into the lexicon of even like when you go to work, you have to take training about phishing emails out, right? So the internet in 2010 wasn't ubiquitous enough yet to where everyone who would have encountered Ben drowned would have known like exactly what's going on, right? Where now, because the technology has progressed in some ways, and also the users are now more familiar with how the internet functions, takes away some of that believability.
Yeah, you wouldn't trust a link that you see, but back then you saw a link that says, I don't know, free Minecraft, and it takes you to a jump scare. And you're
Or
like,
Rickroll. Or
or
Rickroll.
Rickroll, the good troll.
Well, there's also like I think in 2010 there was the mazes that you had to really do intricately, and then at the end they just had the people from The Ring or The Exorcist going, and those were terrible. I'm glad that they don't exist anymore.
Yeah. I do want to address Soren's
I think I just forgot that. Sorry, I'm not saying anything useful.
I was gonna say I want to address Soren's comment in
those
chat.
games.
I want to address Soren's comment in chat and then ask one more question to our lovely guest before we start kind of wrapping towards the end. Or not question, but comment, where Soren says, "I'm fiction that's
please don't start rapping."
Huh?
I said, please don't start rapping.
Oh, I'm not going to. No, I'm not. I don't have King Kong memorized, so I can't. But I know you do hear him before you see him, or so I'm told. But you know, as far as Marble Hornets, right? Like, a lot of the hardest thing to do to make something an ARG is make it a game. That, like, most things you would call an ARG are disqualified on that premise. And whether something is or isn't a game is often a question of whether or not somebody deems there to be a minimum amount of interactivity for them to see it as a game. Marble Hornets has the ciphers and also some emergent narrative bits. So, like, Tim being a villain was entirely an audience thing. So I view it as an ARG. Haunted Cartridge is also interesting in this regard because the only bit of interactivity that it actually has outside of you constructing the narrative is downloading the truth.rtf. And so there is some question as to whether Ben Drown becomes an ARG in the Moon Children section or if it already was one in the Haunted Cartridge section. But, you know, that's not something I expect our guests to answer. It's just a thing I wanted to say because it's an interesting beat and it addresses a comment in chat. Yeah.
I'll let Rhoda go.
No, it's okay. It's interesting because I was thinking of that case in Marble Hornets because it does have some ARG elements, but throughout it sticks to the idea of being a web series, which is very interesting because it's probably the first web series in the internet, but it still had these ARG elements that add to the story, which, now speaking of ARG, I feel like some of them, either the puzzles are super tough or some of them are just super easy and there's no in between. That's why I think web series are more popular because you don't have to add that ARG element of ciphers and whatnot, but you can add other stuff, like, for example, choices and whatnot. Yeah, so go ahead.
Circle has to correct me as well, apparently.
I was gonna say, technically in Arc 1 for Drown.wmv, Deducible says, I'm going to do something which you all suggested, which is play the Elegy of Emptiness in Drown.wmv. So technically there was not just interactivity, but players influenced a choice. So, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, I wouldn't strictly call Arc 1 an ARG, but it certainly had an element, or the building blocks, I should say, of it leading into one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I definitely think, like, the recontextualizing, like, you play Art Moon Children and stuff, goes back and says, oh, by the way, this other thing that you are watching is part of this. So then it kind of pulls it into the game sort of idea.
Yeah, I first of all, sorry, I do get things wrong, as noted. And that's, you know, that happens. But, you know, for me, that's enough. Like, hearing that goes, oh, okay, well, that's not debatable anymore. That's emergent narrative. The narrative wouldn't have gone that way if the players didn't do something, ergo. But, like, I have extremely low bar compared to a lot of people. I am definitely the kind of person who would argue that any walking simulator is a video game. And that is not exactly everybody's line, right? Sometimes pressing forward for some people isn't enough interactivity. And so, you know, maybe that makes me a contrarian, but I think on some level, this gets into the relativisticness of definitions and how difficult it is even to make small decisions about what goes into an adaptation, right? You know, people have minorly different takes on these things. I just happen to be an extremely low threshold person when it comes to interactivity.
Yeah, and for me, like, definitions are just not as interesting as exploring everything else that's going on, you know? Like, I'm more interested about how, like, Ben drowned, what that can tell us about the culture of the internet at that time period, right? And not whether or not it's interactive or not, or whether it meets a bar for interactivity. But I think it points to a developing trend in internet culture where interactivity with audiences is becoming more of a thing, right? That these creators are doing.
Yeah.
Especially because before this, there wasn't enough of a culture in these spaces of the internet like YouTube, right? YouTube had only been around for like 3 years at this point, which seems like a long time in the internet, but is not a long time on the internet actually. So like I feel like this is really a good example of like pointing to the developments of what YouTube is going to turn into.
Yeah. And as Lux talks about video replies, video replies. The strange time of video replies definitely contributed to the differences and of the feeling of the internet. As well as what Tepes is talking about with threads going away and replying like, oh, he saw them, but he didn't reply to them and all that kind of thing.
So I think this is a great question to cap us on then. And it's not on the question list, so you guys don't know what's coming. I didn't know it was coming until we got here. But so do you feel like, so obviously, you know, when you go back and reread X, it's very easy to get that feeling that you're engaging in something from 2010, 2011. In your opinion, do you feel like the complete story dub gets you back to that historical point in time? Or does it feel to you, and was the construction to you more of a modern take on the existing content?
I certainly tried to make it seem like it because in the very beginning, well, not the very beginning, in the first Jedusible chapter, after the Rosa part, there, the way it starts is that I have a frame from 4chan. I'm typing in the words as the dialogue happens. That is what I was trying to go for, is that 2010 4chan look. So you have that time period established in your mind. And you'll notice that throughout the story, the date is constantly hammered in. Like you'll see 2010, 2010, 2010. I made sure not to omit any mentions of the date for that reason.
Well, you get the old YouTube in there too, and I remember seeing that and going,
Yeah,
"Holy
that's right.
shit!"
Yeah. Do you know how hard it was to find a frame where someone was uploading a video on that specific version of YouTube from late 2010? Very hard. I had to do some shit to get that to look right.
Oh man.
I feel like even though making it authentic for the time was the aim, modernization, especially with the inclusion of the artwork, is kind of unavoidable, but not to a degree where it damages transferring the viewer to the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
That's
and
my take on it anyway.
there's always the issue like back in 2010 you couldn't upload more than like 15 minutes and you have a 2 hour 2 hour video. So there's always going to be, you know, the unavoidable conveniences of modernity. And it's like, well, you could split this up in 5-second things and you could just be like, this is a 10-part video. Go watch it 15 minutes by 15 minutes. I watch many pirated movies like that.
It's ironic because I feel like a big part of Ben Jones' creepiness is the retro aspect of the Nintendo 64 itself, and it's
Yeah.
not something that can be easily replicated in modern video games, or they try to, and they just miss some ethereal aspect. And I feel like, in a way, that is kind of not in the dub, but it kind of I have similar thoughts on the dub, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were talking about this because we played Majora's Mask on Thursdays. We didn't last week because I was lazy. But we were talking about how with the 3D remake, like the smoothing out of the edges is so weird because like the polygonal effect is so important to the vibe of the game. So
Yeah. Especially like control wise too. It's like you can't have like updated control schemes. It's just not quite. It doesn't capture the feel of going back and playing on the N64 of that weird controller. Just emulating in general loses that playing the old games on the old systems.
With the
Old
big
controllers.
TV, the big brick TVs.
Big CRTs. Yeah. It's always funny when you watch people with their retro collections. They have a giant 30-inch CRT because they need it to be. And they're like, well, this goes by coax, and I could make it to go via RCA, but it's just not the same. It has to go coax.
Same feeling.
Yeah. Ah.
Well, and like, I mean, ostensibly there's always the option to upload the entire complete story dub in 4x4 resolution at 480 resolution, right? and that would do something, but I mean, I don't know if it would be enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's funny you mentioned that because there was an element of this. If you notice, during the parts where there is art showing in-game events on a TV screen, I specifically had one of the artists make that TV so that it is a CRT, and the frames that go into that TV, I had the artist render them in 4:3 so they fit on it, and that was another part of keeping you in that part, that history in the past, where I was like, this needs to be on the proper hardware.
Yeah. I feel like if you uploaded it in 480 and in the 4:3 aspect ratio, people would be like, did YouTube mess up? Like, is it still processing? Or like, I don't understand.
I'm gonna upload an alternate cut.
Yeah.
Did you
the war
consider? Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's the war between authenticity and digestibility, if that's a word.
Definitely.
or like just like legibility, right? Like can people actually like be able to understand what's going on the screen?
Yeah.
I'm going to upload an alternate cut in 360p with the worst audio quality possible.
Well, you have to film it on a TV. You have to have it playing on, and then film the TV.
Yes.
Get the authentic vibe.
We're gonna release Arc 2 on 4th, just like Justice League. This is a new announcement.
Yeah, is this the circle cut?
The circle count is, we got it. We did it.
Lat just starts yelling in that one section of the truth.rtf. He goes, "Fuck you, I'm not talking to you."
You just have Latches in your room dubbing live, but it's just him talking on camera.
Just him constantly peeking the mic.
Oh no! Did you consider titling it "The Complete Story Dub.wmv" when it went up?
I toyed with the idea of adding the file extension, but ultimately I decided that just wasn't going to work.
You could have picked some god awful file extension though, like
.avi.
.gif.
Oh no.
.gif.
.nkv. How did this even get uploaded?
You can upload NKVs.
Oh, I guess that's how Streamlabs does it.
OBS also defaults MKV for some reason.
MP4 will upload faster, but you can still upload an MKV.
Ben.jpg.
I feel like in like
Ben.tiff.
if TikTok is still around in 10 years, there'll be someone who is doing a very similar project to you, but in like 10-second videos.
Well, it's kind of this interesting thing. Like when Vine was going down, everyone had their Vine archives because they're like, if Vine goes down, or when Blip.tv went down, everyone had to like quickly download all of their videos. And yeah, because people don't keep archives because they're not data hoarders, which they should be. But like, what happens when like your channel gets deleted and you didn't have those videos archived? You just have to be like, creepers on the internet, did you download my whole YouTube archive? Please tell me you did.
I have learned that lesson.
I know the current anxiety is what if the archive VN goes down for the Awakening stuff, but that's for another day. How do we wrap this up? God, is there a way to wrap this?
Actually, before we do that, you mind if I run back to something that was asked earlier?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, Soren asked a joke question. I only answered half of it. Have any of you read SCP 2293?
Oh, is it
Of
the
course.
fucking
SCP 2293. If you haven't read it, read it. For now, all I will say is, did you know that world-renowned writer Stephen King was once hit by a car? Just something to consider.
Oh no. Yeah, David, that's David, Morgan, Diego. SCP is an off-stream thing because we'll be here for another 2 hours if I attempt to explain it.
I feel like I know what SCP is, but I'm not. The wrinkles of my internet brain pops up like, oh yeah, I saw that 3 years like a while ago.
It might be
I remember this thing.
the biggest collection of of collaborative horror fiction ever made. And it may also be one of the only good things that came off of 4chan.
I don't know what this is at all.
But it's a fascinating little thing. So
I'm just community adjacent.
So seriously, thank you guys so much for coming on and answering all of our questions for 2 hours. We really appreciate it. It's been amazing, and your insights have been just amazingly helpful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
Thank you for having us.
I love
Very
that
fun.
TLDR of SLP because I know what SCP is now that it's Creepypasta Mansion, but it's a lab and it's also not written by 13-year-olds.
there's some remarkably good fiction in there by 13-year-olds.
That's true. That's true.
Cryptids.
Oh, the baby.
I remember what my last question was. All right, I'm going to steal you for one last question before we finish up. This is how I'm going to thank you. All right, actually, you know what? Do I want to do this? This is the internal question, isn't it? About the question.
You might as well.
I might as well. You're right. I've already committed.
Do it.
Go for it.
Did the
No.
oh
No.
so it's impossible to deny how much creepypasta fan art has come out of Ben Drowned. And I have to ask the question of whether the creepypasta fan art influenced any of the visual design as it came into the complete story dub.
That's actually a question for the artists, really. Whether they took that into account.
I would say, even though the art is not visible, I'm pretty sure there was some essence of that creepypasta art. Pretty sure. Like, I think some of the artists do come back, do have some of the creepypasta backgrounds and stuff. And yeah, I think you can tell. Then you can tell if you just analyze it a bit.
There
Or
was
not, I don't know. I'm probably bullshitting right now.
there's one frame that I'm thinking of when I'm asking this question. It's an amazing image. It's also the best rendition of the Dead Eyes Ben that I've ever seen in my life. Because it doesn't do the blood thing. Like, it takes out the thing that is too trite and does just what it needs to do, and it looks fantastic.
Wait,
Yeah,
which
that's-
image are you talking about?
It's I can't remember what the time code is, but it's the one where Ben's super zoomed in, completely black eyes, massive grin. Maybe I just imagined this, but I think it's
No. I know which image you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, the image that, if I'm thinking of the right one, that's literally just a canon image, except it's drawn into the video.
That explains a lot, doesn't it? But it looks fucking great. It is the best rendition of that image I have ever seen, because I think the other ones overproduce it.
That's fantastic.
So one final thank you to you all for coming on and dealing with us for 2 hours. It's been great.
It's been great. Do we want to do a small plugs? If you want to put Discord links for within Hubris, or if there's Discord links, or if there's your channel, I know that Zed streams. So
yeah, please
go ahead,
plug all your stuff.
Go ahead.
I want to creep on everyone's Twitters and Twitches and everything. So
Hey Zed, are you in a position where you can copy the invite link to Within Hubris?
Sure, 1 moment. I shall make one because I don't know where it is. Okay. Post it in the chat now.
Thank you for getting the Within Hubris link. If I do anything, all of the Streamlabs will become disrupted because Discord don't like that.
Yeah.
Discord's like that.
Ricky.
Our 5th member is
has
questions.
What a good question.
Oh, little baby.
What a good
He's been
question.
trying to eat the mic.
Haven't we all?
He's like, give it to me. I would like it.
Yes. Thank you for posting that.
That's Within Hubris there. We would love for you to join and interact with all of our channels so you spawn more Pokemon for us.
Farm Jadcoin?
Support this.
Farm Jad coins. Yes, that's mainly the Pokemon. So yes. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. Just thank you for having us here. I've just been ecstatic this whole time.
Yes, it's been very
It's been
fun.
so
Thank
fun.
you.
I'm glad you guys have
So
enjoyed it. It's the best thing that I can hear is the person who, coordinates all of this stuff. And I hope my co-hosts have gotten to ask questions that have helped them out as well. All right.
Yeah, it's been great hearing you guys. I'm excited to see the next arc to be confused again, because that's kind of what happens.
Your mind will be exploded, and you will see images that you're like, what the fuck? I focus tested the promotional image that's coming out as soon as the stream ends, and let me tell you, everybody who hasn't seen it before goes, Jesus Christ, what the fuck? It's incredible.
I have the vaguest recollection of seeing that image elsewhere, because I've just been on the internet and, shitpost. So I'll just be like, hey, that image is familiar, but I have no idea where it's from. And now I know where it's from.
And thank you to you all, the viewers, for watching, of course, as well. We really appreciate you coming and spending the time to watch these interviews. I mean, your participation, allows us to get people by saying, hey, by the way, we have people who watch this, and also it's good to know that people care about, talking to the people who are making the content about the games that we really love. So it means a lot. All right. Well, okay, you'll catch us next week for the start of the Moon Children. That'll be from 1 to 3 on Sunday, unless something changes. Again, you can watch our Twitter for that.
That's 1 to 3 Central.
Yeah, it's 1 to 3 Central. Thank you, Morgan.
America Central. America.
All right. And I'll have Latches play us out again with that lovely tune. And, again, I think I linked the Bandcamp at the beginning. I think I still have it pulled up. Let me check quickly. If I don't, let me grab the link. Because it's a crime that I can't pay for this this soundtrack, let me tell you. It's too good. It's too fucking good. So there you go. All right, there's the whole YouTube redirect that's killed our chat.
Oh my
God. Oh, man. All right. Have a lovely day, guys, and we will catch you next week for some Moon Children.
Bye.
thank you.